Thank you, and nice to be here. So, my name is Markus, as Per said, and I'm a consultant, and I have been working within software industry for about 20 years. And during that time, I've made some observations among all the different organizations I've been at, which I would like to share with you. But first, to set the scene, when I visit my father-in-law, we often talk about work, or more specifically, his work. And he builds machines, like in the automation lines for big manufacturing industries. And that's real engineering, right? You have laws of physics, you need to design things, build them, ship them worldwide, assemble them, and then put them in operation. And when we talk, and he says, well, you guys in software, you don't have any standards, you don't have any hardware, you're just pushing a few buttons and that's it. And of course, that's his outside view. He's a bit jealous. But still, he has a valid point. We operate in a unique environment. We have very few constraints. Software is magic, at least to some people, because we can do a change from anywhere in the world, have that deployed anywhere in the world within seconds. Few other businesses have this opportunity. But let's take a step back on why do we even develop software in the first place? And we need to solve a problem, or we need to enable someone to do something. That's the end goal, right? And then you think that, well, solving that goal will be full of technical challenges, or at least I thought that when I was in school, that would be fun to work on all those technical challenges. If we fast forward to today, I've learned that that's not always the case. We spend little time on working on these challenges, and we spend a lot more time working on other challenges or problems. So I think that we have this unique attribute that we basically in software have. We're limited by the speed of light, we have a few laws and regulations, and that's basically it. All other problems and latency is basically something we ourselves introduced. And what I think that we do, there's a lot of complecting going on within the software industry. Complecting, that's the verb of making something complicated. It was coined by Rich Hickey, the author of the programming language Closure, in a very, very good talk about Simple Made Easy that I think you should definitely go view if you haven't. And I think that we do make things a lot more complicated than they have to be in the software industry. We keep adding things. We add people, and we add code, and then we add processes to deal with that code or those people. And then when that doesn't work, we just add more people, more code. We split our system into in more systems, smaller systems, and then it's a downward spiral. And I think that adding things will not help. And I think that's an illusion of control, that the more things we add, the more control we gain. But I think that is not true, because the more things we add, the further away the end user problem we push ourselves. We we spend a lot more focus on building software than we do on solving problems for the end user. And when I develop software today, I have these three core principles I let guide me. And I let them guide me both in organizational work and in technical work. And I think that they enable me to solve my problems cheaper, as in with less effort, and the problems will be solved better, like it's a better fit to the problem. And that's a nice attribute, to solve something cheaper and better. And those principles are to always work on what is most important right now, and to get feedback as soon as possible. And that's feedback from code or from customers or from users, and to keep things as simple as possible. So what is the most simplest thing that can possibly work? And then I do that. So we're going to have a look on, based on these three principles, we're going to look at three different problems and see how they could have been improved or be made less of a problem. And the first one is technical depth, and you have to excuse me. I used to say technical depth, and then it sounds like I'm saying depth. So then my colleague kindly said, you need to pronounce it det. So now I say technical death, but you just have to bear with me. And the next one is too few people. When you need to be more on the team to solve the things you need to do. And then you finally have bad requirements, when the requirements are of such a low quality or constantly keep changing. So let's start with technical debt. And have you ever experienced like a full stop in development because the entire team are busy resolving technical debt? Yep. Or maybe sprint planning where a large part of the post-its are related to technical debt. And when you ask people, what is it? You will get different answers and you will get vague answers. Someone might say that it's a legacy code base. The persons who wrote it they are no longer around. Someone might say it's our monolith. And maybe we don't have any tests in this part of the system. So we have a technical debt there. And my view is that there is no thing as technical debt. When is it due and who will collect it? I think that technical debt as a term is very unfortunate. I think it's very emotional and vague. And for some people, technical debt is this old workaround you made that are still in the system, and it troubles you, it haunts you. It doesn't cause any damage, but you dislike it still being there. And for some, it's like this system is not written in the latest, greatest. It's not written in Rust, and therefore it's a technical debt problem. And one time I worked in a project. It was pretty hectic, and we were shooting for a marketing release. And the product manager said that after the release, you will get a nice chunk of hours to work on technical debt. And we got it. So after release, he said, well, here's some hours, and off you go. And one guy in this team, he wrote his own immutable collection library. Who collected that debt? I guess if he had stated that out loud, that this is what I'm going to do with these hours, no one would have allowed him to do that. I think that's one of the problems with this term, that it's sort of like, if you're not a programmer yourself, it's like a veto. If you're a product owner, it's like, no, we can't do that. Why? Technical debt. And that shortcuts the discussion. And I think what we need to do is to identify concrete problems and talk about those problems instead. And then it's much easier for them to prioritize, or even better, make them part of a future investment. There's no value in just solving a problem if that problem doesn't enable you to do something else. So if you can combine it with the feature you're going to have to work on that will improve your feature work, then you don't even have to talk about technical debt. It's just part of that feature. You don't have to split it in two notes or estimate them differently. They are the same thing. And then it's much easier for product owners to agree on the work you need to do. Yeah, you can avoid technical debt, or you might be stuck in bad code. But I think that the first thing you need to do is accept that this is your code now. If you're on a team, you own a piece of software, and it's in bad shape, that's unfortunate, but that's your problem. It's your responsibility to have that under control and in good shape. It doesn't matter if you're not the one who wrote it. It's still your responsibility. And taking control of your code base, the most valuable thing for me is to have automated tests, because then you can make a change. You have high confidence that my system will still work. And once I worked on a company where we did a minor upgrade on operating system. So we went from 9.2 to 9.3. And the product manager asked the test lead, how many hours do you need to regression test this system? We didn't have any automated tests at that time. It was an embedded system. And they said something like thousands of hours. And this product manager was furious. Like, how did we end up here? But that's what was needed. If they were to guarantee no regressions, they needed thousands of hours. just ridiculous. He was furious, as I said. And that's the thing. If you don't have any tests, you can either go with extreme slow progress because you need to test things manually, or you can go the risky way. Just don't test, push it anyway. But if you have good test coverage, then you can go with high confidence at a high speed, and that's really valuable. Test-driven development is an excellent way to deal with both new code and existing code. If you have existing code, it's just a matter of writing a test. First you comment out the code, you write a test, you make it fail, you comment the code back in, watch the test pass, and then you can do your refactoring. So test-driven development is not only for new code. The simplest thing possible. A lot of cases where code is complicated, it's almost always because someone tried to foresee the future. They tried to make things more configurable or smart than they needed to be. And then they couldn't see into the future, so they were wrong. And now we have this thing in the code which doesn't hold true. It's just a maintenance work. And I think that keep things as simple as possible and understand what you're trying to solve. And that might be a bigger problem than you think, because if people don't understand the problem they are solving, they might introduce wrong abstractions or just write things that aren't needed or will never be needed. So understand the problem you are solving. And my boss often say that if you don't understand what you're building, you're not allowed to touch the keyboard. I think that's a good rule of thumb. So these core principles. So improve the code that will help you now. Don't waste any time improving code that don't have any immediate benefit. Use tests to get fast feedback on your change. So having tests will allow you to move faster. And the last thing is to keep it simple. Don't try to foresee the future. It's super hard. Another problem is when you're too few people. Have you ever worked in a team where you thought that if only we were more people in this team, then we will get more work done? Or a manager is saying that we need to speed things up. Let's add some people. I know I have many times. And it was this one time, take the time, I was a tech lead on a project. It was a total nightmare. The previous contractor were running late. The previous contractor didn't have anything working, and we were brought in. And we needed Python and web developers. We got back-end Java developers with absolutely no web experience. And then we got 2 times the people we asked for. And we went, in that project, we went from like 4 people to 15, 20 people during the course of a few months. And we produced tons of bad code, and we did tons of features that were later tossed out or rewritten. And the go-to solution for management was always, do you need more people? And we said, no, we don't need more people. We don't know what we need, but definitely not more people. And yes, you need reason for growth. I mean, sometimes you need to grow a team. You just have to do that. But I think it's a solution we reach for too soon and too often. We're underestimating the impact of growing a team, because when you add someone to a team, it will initially slow down. You will have group dynamics. You will have to introduce this new team member to code, to the domain, to other people. And then we overestimate the value this person will contribute. And overestimating value is really easy because it's a lot easier to track cost, like time spent, than it is to track the value added. So what most people do is they focus on cost. And they track cost, and then they say that then it must be the same thing as value. But it's not. And the reasoning goes that why would anyone produce something of no value? But it turns out that it's very easy to produce things without value. We'll get back to that shortly. Ego-driven growth is another thing I've experienced, and that doesn't have it. It's only bad because it's driven by people who want to climb a career ladder. So once I was in an organization where a person was very keen on advancing his career, and there were limited options to do so. So instead, he grew the team beneath him. So he just made sure that a lot of people came to his team. He made up responsibility areas and names for different individuals, and voila, then he was more significant than his peers because he had a larger team. And it's the same thing with architects. If you have an architect for a big code base, then you have a higher status than someone with a smaller code base. So growing for the sake of ego is beware of that, because it have absolutely no added benefit, just driven by ego. But being few is not necessarily bad. Less is actually more. I think we should be careful when growing, because being a small group of people have some benefits. If you're many people, you will add a lot more code. If you're fewer people, you're forced to keep your solutions simple and smaller. If you're a small team, it will be much easier to communicate. So a larger team takes more time and effort to communicate and to coordinate. And as you know, software is a lot about communicating, so there will be a lot of time spent in communication. But I think the main benefit from being a small team is that you can't work on too many things at once. You need to carefully select what you're going to work with. And I think that's a really nice thing of being small. And there's a theory that confirms that working on too many things might not be as valuable as you think. And that's the theory of constraints. And this is it's sprung from manufacturing industry, but it's useful in system thinking in general. And the practice is basically to identify the most limiting constraint, resolve that, maybe not completely, but until it's no longer the most limiting constraint. And then you identify what is now the most limiting constraint. So to give an example, if you're a manufacturing company and you want to make more money, let's say that the company agrees on we need to sell more things. Where should they invest? Well, if it's the logistics that is the current limitation, that they cannot ship things any faster than they do today, it doesn't matter if they invest in production, because the limitation is within logistics. It's not until the logistics limitation or bottleneck is resolved where you can shift focus, then it might be the manufacturing department, or it might be something else. Here again, it's very hard to foresee the future. It's really easy to believe that I know, but I know at least number 2, number 3, but then things happen and things shift, and it might not turn out the way you think it will. Theory of constraint also states that if you improving non-limiting constraints will not provide any significant value. So if we look on software, working on things that are not the most important thing right now might not provide any significant value. But it will still produce costs like inventory or code in our case. So it might not give any significant value, but we will still have the maintenance burden, we'll spend time on it, so we have the risk of waste. And not being the most limiting or important thing doesn't say that something is not important or that it has no value. It's just that it's not the most important thing right now, or it's not the most valuable thing to do at the moment. I usually just simplify this to work on the most important thing. So being few keeps the code small and simple, and it forces you to work on the most important thing. Next one, bad requirements. So when in this project you have the input to sprint is really low, you're forced to make a lot of assumptions, and then when you demo it to the customer or product owner, it turns out that they don't like the solution. They maybe you didn't solve the right thing, or that they now changed their mind. That's happened to me a few times at least. And I think one solution I've seen to this is to think harder. Maybe you have one of your senior people spend some time ahead of a sprint to analyze and explain how to solve something. I think thinking before acting is generally a good idea, but it tends to focus a lot more on how to build something rather than are we building or solving the right problem. So it's nothing wrong with trying to think before acting, but it's not enough. You need to validate those ideas as soon as possible, both the idea and the implementation of it. And so one time I was working in this organization where the business people were forbidden to speak with developers because they kept changing requirements all the time, which obviously caused havoc in IT's plans. So the solution was you're not allowed to talk to people anymore. Do your requirements in writing, give them to a business analyst who will give them to the scrum master, who will assign it to the team, who will then develop it. And yeah, you know the drill. Took forever. The business were super unhappy. This was just not enough because they were operating in a highly competitive consumer market. This was totally unacceptable. Well, the solution, of course, was to build a super complex system where they could configure and tweak most, if not all, behaviors of this software. That, of course, it was very complex, and only a few people could now operate this system, and that became a bottleneck. And a much, much simpler solution would have been to just work together. Like they didn't know exactly what they wanted. We didn't know exactly what to build, so we could have just worked together. That would have saved a lot of hours. And I think that's the most silly and unnecessary problem we have in the software industry today, that we have IT on one side and we have the business on the other side. And we claim that we work together because we have our backlog grooming, we have product owners, sprint demos every month, but that's not working together. That's like occasional meetings where we have fika. Why don't we work together every day? Why don't we share office? Why don't we have the same boss? So I think instead of trying to think harder, you should just work together more. Work together with experts of different sort, domain experts, user experience experts, programmers, and try to get more perspective on the problem and get feedback on your problems as soon as possible. Because change is a good thing. That means that you learn something. And when you learn something, either you learn that something is bad and you should no longer pursue that route. It might not be the best. You shouldn't continue doing that. Or you learn that maybe the thing you thought were of less importance is really super important, and then you should do more of that. And again, predicting the future is very hard still. So I think you should do these experiments in as small steps as possible. And you should try to get feedback as soon as possible and adjust. So 2 weeks ago, I was building a feature, pretty small feature, maybe days of worth of work. Did half of it, pushed it to the test environment, and we demoed it to a customer. And the day after, the customer says, "I don't like it. It doesn't solve my problems. It's not good enough." And then we paused that task, and we'll take another stab at it shortly. But we saved 4 hours from waste to continue to go in that direction. And you might think 4 hours, that's just 4 hours, basically nothing. But if you do this on a scale, if everyone on the team continuously asks for quick feedback on every feature all the time, you will save a lot of time. You will eliminate a lot of waste. So back to the core principles. Changing requirements is a good thing, and you should always try to look on what is the simplest thing that could possibly work, and you do that. Get feedback and avoid guessing too much. You still have to guess, but you have to make smaller guesses. So those principles of mine, they are not new, nor are they unique. Most of it is part of something called extreme programming. How many here knows what extreme programming is? Quite a few. How many use it? A few as well. Know those guys. Extreme programming, for those of you who don't know what it is, it's this old process, something invented in the late 1990s. It's focused on getting feedback and communicating. And it focuses on testing your code. Test-driven development is part of that, to do pair programming and to keep things simple. And if you agree to at least something I've said today, I think you should definitely go check extreme programming out. If you compare it to modern software development, I'm not going to name, safe maybe. This is a breath of fresh air. So I think extreme programming and especially test-driven development has made the most significant change on my work as a developer. I think it's fantastic. But if you use extreme programming, will all your problems go away? Of course not. And I think extreme programming, I don't follow all the principles. I think to me, it's more of a mindset than it is a process. I think that it brings back focus on what you can do with software, and it helps me to utilize this magic attribute of software, that you can make changes really, really fast, deploy it, and get feedback, and then adjust and take a new feature. And it's a very good tool. It's not easy though. It takes a lot of hard work and a lot of effort, because it's very easy to fall back in bad behavior. I'm just going to add a few more features until I deploy, or maybe I'm just going to do this thing configurable in the code. And that's very easy. But if you accept that it's hard, we don't shy away from technical challenges. So why do we shy away from other challenges? So I think this is valuable enough to pursue, even if it's hard work. So in summary, take ownership of your code. You absolutely must do that. No one will do it for you. Being able to do small and quick changes with confidence require that you have your code base under control. Test-driven development is an excellent way of taking that control. You should always focus on what is most important right now. Remember the theory of constraint, that working on things that are not most important might not produce any significant value. You just have to accept that you don't know. You don't know, the business people don't know, everyone is guessing. You don't know for sure until you have put it in production and you have received feedback from it. So always try to get feedback as soon as possible, and that's my encouragement to you, that tomorrow morning when you get into the office, you should think about, how long have I been working on this without getting any feedback? And what is the thing I can do to get feedback from it, like now? And I guarantee that that will improve whatever you're working on. So thank you. Any questions? Just gonna have to. I changed my mind about the questions.
Okay. Anyone?
Oh, I get a mic. Thank you. Yes, so I was wondering, because you said that you want to keep teams small and that you want to keep the business people and the programmers in the same office, right? But if the office scales, if the company scales to a point where you need multiple offices, how would you then split your employers? Because then there's going to be a communication friction between those offices. So in that case, is it perhaps more important to maintain good communication between your developers and keep them in one office, or to mix the employers from their different professions in each corresponding office?
I think what I would do, I think what is called, is it Conway's law, that your system will look the same way as your organization. So I would not cut my teams on technology. I would rather cut them, what are they working with? If people are working on, let's say, a checkout or an e-commerce site, then I would group the developers and the business people working on that part together. and so basically group them by business from business perspective. Was that an answer?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
But also given that these requirements and projects change, would the employers then move office or?
Yeah, I'm a consultant, and so the question was, are you moving a lot? And as a consultant, yeah, and that's my day-to-day work. I shift my office when I have to work with some people or some part of the organization. So yeah, definitely.
Yes, but as a company with full-time employees, you said that you would in that case split your employers by the offices in which they work together on the same projects. But then if those projects change, will you then move your employees?
I would try to not. I would try to group people in terms of products or domains rather than projects. So try to. You can't get away from it completely, of course, but I would try to group people based on what they are trying to solve, and not based on how they are their tools.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, you mentioned getting fast feedback from the customer. So you said you save 4 hours of work by going to the customer, but in my world, how we work with our customers, it would take like a few days to get in contact with the customer and to get the feedback. So that means like we would pause work and then have to start up something new and work on something new, and then possibly also get back to that old work when the feedback is in on something we partially developed just to get feedback. How do you handle that?
So the question was how do you handle when feedback takes up days to receive from a customer? Are there any way to improve that? You can shorten the time from days to something less. Maybe if you just call someone, are they customer aware of that their feedback will have this great impact? Then maybe they can change their priorities to give feedback sooner.
I mean, we sell a SaaS service, so it's more like there's a request in the list that we're solving for a specific customer, and then they might not know that it's being done right now, and an enterprise customer to reach out to someone there usually takes a few days to get in contact.
If you can't talk directly to the customer like soon enough, maybe you can have, if you absolutely have to have a proxy or someone, a product owner on your side who can take decisions that are maybe more likely to do it in the same way as an end customer than yourself would do. But I think that when possible, to explain for the customer why their feedback is of such great importance usually helps. And they often want to give feedback when they get a chance.
So we did not say you cannot talk to the developers in our team, but we did say you cannot ask any requirements of the developers, because people used to do that. So everyone, hey, can we fix this? And the developers, when they hear someone saying that, they jump on it, and that does not make a good environment in my case. So our rule is that everyone can talk to everyone, but if you want to make a change request, then you go through the official channels. What do you think about that?
How long does it, if the business people need to make a change in lead time, what are we talking about? If I have a change I would like you to do, is it weeks away?
No, it can be, we have a team only working on smaller things, so it can go, pretty fast.
But if they get approved, their feature request approved, then they're allowed to work together with you to develop
Yeah,
it.
you're always allowed to communicate.
Yeah.
But you're not able to say, do this.
No, maybe
that's
no.
only the...
Everyone in business shouldn't be able to just freely change order of prioritization. But they should be able to influence what you're building and how you're building it. But maybe not everyone can't affect priorities, of course. Yeah.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I'll give it to you afterwards. Hey, thanks for a nice speech. I like this talk. There was a section that was provocative to me, in the sense that you said there's no technical debt. I was like, wait a minute. We talk about technical debt all the time. Like it's just a concept that me and my colleagues are super used to. And so I was very interested in learning more about how I can change my mindset about this and be more specific about the things that we are actually talking about. So technical debt, I agreed with what you said. When we say technical debt, what do we mean?
Yeah.
It's a very broad term. And I guess this question is very broad as well. But like, do you have any tips that are short on how I can be more specific about the things that we intend to do, but that we choose to not do right now?
Well, if you have a change that is of like some sort of significant size, then you have to make it concrete and you talk to people like budget owners maybe that we need money to fix this and the effect will be the following. So then you try to take a problem that you can define and ask for like, can we prioritize this? But in my experience, people tend to go to business owner with small problems. Like if you have small problems in the code, just make it part of the feature. You don't have to talk to business owners about it because they are counting on you to build or improve something. And part of that work is to continuously improve and fix the problems you have in your code base. So I don't think it needs to be this thing in all discussions.
Did I understand it correctly that if I visit my technical debt task in 3 months' time, it might not address the actual problem anymore? Is that part of it? Or?
Can you take that one more time?
Okay, if I, let's say that I start adding technical debt tasks to my Jira backlog. So we're working with Jira at my customer, okay?
Mm. You're not alone.
Like it or not, you know? And we have a big backlog of technical debt. But part of the problem with this backlog is that we might not know specifically why we're trying to address this and how we're addressing it. Is that the problem? Or
If you don't know why you're addressing a technical debt, I would say yes, that's a problem because then what will the value of fixing it be? So I think that instead of having designated tasks for like technical debt, make it part of a feature. So if you're building a new feature, grow that feature to include technical fixes. Or
thank you. Yeah, I've said enough.
There's one guy over there.
Okay, but
On the top.
this guy was before. Okay.
No, he was.
it was number one actually.
Thank you. No worries. Thank you, first of all, for great presentation. I just want to ask you, you mentioned about this organization, about different people that working in that organization. It was too many parameters that wasn't working. What was the solution? How did you manage to synchronize everything in that crowd? And what kind of digital platform did you choose to find and solve that solution? Because as you said it, no one was talking to nobody and it was forbidden from business people to talk to the developers and so on and so forth. How did you solve that problem? Thank you.
Okay, so how did we solve the problem when business people weren't allowed to talk to developers? If I remember it correctly, the organization still had a large portion of their hours managed via this like written change requests and requirement work, but they agreed to allocate a part of the budget to like just changes that they didn't have to specify in advance, so that they could do their roadmap planning in one channel, and then they had a designated bandwidth of hours basically to do quicker fixes or smaller features, and then that was agreed that was enough for both parties to operate in. Was that good enough answer?
Did you choose any common platform for synchronizing everybody's effort into that project?
No. No.
This verbal communication?
Yeah.
Final question.
Okay. When you say keeping the team in the same office, that mean that you don't believe in remote work, or if is that the the answer? Like, why not?
No, we are remote workers ourselves. So when I say office, I'm like, even the virtual office. But I think that the important thing is we work together as a single unit. It's not like we go and visit them every now and then. So it works equally well or even better in virtual, because then you can just call anyone.
All right, thank you very much. Big
Yeah,
hands.
thank you.